Welcome everybody to our seventh episode of Slow Living, a webinar series driven by sustainability rooted in community. Today, I have the honor of welcoming the very talented and highly influential Matison Card as our guest speaker. Matison is an actress, model, dancer, singer-songwriter, and podcast host, amongst other things. I mean, I could go on and on for days. But today, she is here to talk about her experiences in a multitude of industries and what we can do within our daily lives to contribute less waste to the natural environment. Specifically, we will be talking about slow fashion and how our consumer habits drive a polluting industry. So before I give Matison the floor, I would just like to let everybody know that towards the end of Matison's presentation, we do a Q&A section. So if you have a question that comes up at all during her presentation, please put it in the comment box and I will make sure that we get to you and get all of your questions answered for the webinar. So without further ado, Matison, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone. First off, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to take some time to talk about my experience in the fashion world and how that has changed my consuming habits when it comes to clothing and beauty products in general. Just my whole life has changed because I've been exposed to so many different tendencies that just don't line up with what I and what has really sparked my interest is ending our relationship with fast fashion. A lot of people don't really realize how big of a waste issue it is in our textile world. And I was one of these people. I mean, I shopped at Forever 21 when I was a kid. I'm no innocent person in this, but I think where the problem is that we just don't really think about it. We're just kind of like buying without a conscious thought. And then once you take a step back, you sort of realize that the clothing is really cheap. A lot of times the people making the clothes are not making a livable wage, and then they fall apart and then they end up in the landfill. And so that really bothers me a lot. And I'm really sad that I didn't realize that this was an issue for as long as I did. And I think that a lot of people are the same as me, that we didn't really make that connection of waste within the clothing world. And I think when I was modeling is when I really realized, oh wow, like companies are creating clothes for a different season every week of the year, not for the 4 seasons of winter, spring, summer, and fall. And that constant changing of what's in style is really just creating a lot of waste. And the big secret is that all trends circle back around. It's just one big cycle, but they trick you into thinking you're out of style so that you buy more stuff. But by the time that stuff comes back around into style, you've gotten rid of it, and then you're going to buy it again. And we see this with like decade fashion coming back in style right now. The 90s are making a resurgence because that's now considered vintage, which I'm showing my age a little here. That's so wild to me that like the chokers I was wearing when I was a kid are now back in style. But really, it's just creating a lot of waste. And so what I've done for myself to really change that habit is to first off do a self audit and really look in my closet. And a really good tip is to face all of your hangers in one direction. And then when you wear an article, flip the hanger around so it's facing a different way in your closet. And then you can really just see what you're actually wearing all the time and what pieces are something you'd wear to a special occasion or stuff that you're just holding on to because you feel bad about getting rid of it. And when you sort of narrow down what you use, what you could need in your wardrobe, you can start to make a capsule wardrobe, which is more of a forever decision. So instead of impulse buying whatever's in fashion at that time, you're really just wearing clothes that make you feel happy and empowered, and you're holding on to them. And that does mean buying more expensive pieces that you intend on keeping for years and years. I mean, you could buy a really beautifully structured coat that was made by people who got a living wage, and you can wear it for 20 years. It's just not as common to see that anymore because of the fast fashion industry. And one of the examples that we were talking about prior to this seminar today was actually about Abercrombie, when they had extra clothes, they would burn them instead of having them be donated to a Goodwill or a thrift store because they didn't want what they considered as poor or lesser people wearing their clothes, which is just unfathomable to me that you could be so blatantly wasteful. But the thing is those clothes would have ended up in a landfill anyway. So it's just really wild to me that we haven't necessarily made this connection about how big of an issue textile waste is. And it's, again, as a model, I've seen the different seasons and how fast they are, and really just the massive quantity of clothing being produced that is just absolutely unnecessary. We already have enough clothes for everyone to be clothed and happy and fashionable and changing it up and having fun. I by no means think that fashion is this evil thing altogether. I love to look cute. I like to buy new things. But now what I do is when I'm looking to get something, we have reduce, reuse, recycle. But before I even get to those three, it's the question of, do I even need this item? Can I borrow it from a friend? Is it something I'm going to use more than once? Is there anything that's already in my closet that I can style up differently to fill that void? And if the question is no, and you really do need something new, try checking out a thrift store and doing secondhand first before you go and buy a new article of clothing. I really love to use apps that you can resell your clothes. It's really affordable and it's easier than going to the thrift store during COVID because you don't have to leave your home and feel unsafe out in public. And Poshmark and Depop are my two favorite. You can find really good quality clothing that's most of the time never been worn or worn a handful of times, is in perfect condition, and is being sold for like 75 to 80% off the original price. And you're keeping that clothing in cycle of someone using it instead of it being put in the landfill. So those are some of the tips that I like to use for reducing my textile issues. But also, I love to wear makeup. I love beauty products. I'm a very girly person. That's just who I am. But when you look at the darker side of the beauty industry with all of the plastic waste of the containers, the toxic chemicals in the products, it really doesn't make it feel as glamorous anymore. But there are a lot of really cool swaps on the market, and I actually have some examples right next to me. So one of the biggest tips that I give is to just start where it feels comfortable for you. I happen to be running low on toothpaste, so I got a new toothpaste that didn't come in a plastic tube because I needed it anyway. It was a similar price. It was an easy swap for me. And then that sort of boosted my confidence in my own personal zero waste journey. And it made me excited to research more stuff because it was an empowering journey. It wasn't something that felt like a huge burden or something that was too big for me to tackle as an individual. I really think that the small little daily changes add up to a greater picture, and you do have the power as a consumer. As a model and an actress, I have seen firsthand that the consumer dictates what the business practices are going to be. If there's a higher demand for eco-friendly products, you best believe that the companies are going to put them out because we still have the money. So we do have a lot more power than I think we give ourselves credit for. And what you purchase is a direct action to support sustainability. So every time you're purchasing something, whether that be in the fashion world or a face product or even just where you buy your chips, you know, there are ways to buy it in packaging that is more eco-friendly and sustainable. And it's really just a mindset shift to do some research and reflect. And I am going to go back to my bathroom. So this is an old mustard jar container that I kept. And these are my tooth tabs. They look like pills, but they're toothpaste. And these are really easy and they don't come in plastic packaging. And I highly recommend these for if you're backpacking or camping too, because they're really, really light. You just pop it in your mouth, chew it up, brush it around. They're amazing. I love them so much. And then I also have mouthwash tablets. I really liked using Listerine for a really long time. I'm a mouthwash person. I have a retainer at night. I like to clean it, you know, but those plastic bottles, it just really made me feel guilty. So I found a solution that I can still have my mouthwash, but it comes in a glass jar and the water isn't pre-mixed with the product, which is a pretty common secret to the zero waste world. Is most of the products are just concentrates without the water added, because then it doesn't need to be stored in a big plastic container. So you'll see that in a lot of zero waste products. And then as far as the shower, again, I happen to be running low on shampoo and conditioner. So I decided to do some research, and now I have a completely different hair routine. I use a shampoo bar. This is from Unwrapped Life. I've had this for 3 months and it wasn't much bigger than this, and my husband and I both use it. It lasts, I would say, 3 to 5 times longer than a normal bar of shampoo, and this was $15 retail. So it lasts for way longer and it ends up being cheaper that way. And then for conditioner, I'm going to be honest with you, I tried a conditioner bar. It didn't work. My hair's too thick and curly and I have products in it from work, so I really needed a good conditioner. So what I went for was refilling a jar with conditioner. This is from EcoSlay. It's a Black-owned company. They're incredible, and it's so natural that you have to keep it in the fridge, and it smells like bananas. It's amazing. But basically what I do is, instead of buying a conditioner in a plastic bottle, when I'm done, I take this back to Joyfill, which is a refill shop in Denver. I highly recommend checking it out. They do online orders as well if you're not in Denver. But I'll just send back this empty glass jar and they'll fill it back up for me. And they weigh it beforehand, so you're just paying for the amount of product inside the jar, not the weight of the jar. And then I'm using the same container for my Luscious conditioner that I couldn't live without. And that's the thing. Everyone will have certain areas where they have products that they're like, oh, I really like this. I don't want to give it up. There are totally swaps that feel just as luxurious and amazing, but without the guilt of the plastic packaging. And then I have one more example next to me. This is my new deodorant, which is really cool because it's still just a stick deodorant, but this container is cardboard. So there's no plastic. You still push it up from the bottom. Like, it's the easiest swap I've ever made because it's really no different for me. But when I'm done, I don't have this plastic container that can't be recycled. So again, these swaps, they're not that much different than the original product. It's just made with sustainability in mind. And most of the time, the products have surprised me and have been better than what I was using beforehand. These zero waste companies are popping up everywhere nowadays, which is really exciting. Normally, trends aren't my favorite, but I'm really, really grateful that everyone is coming on board with sustainability, because it is something that everybody can do no matter where you're at. And I know it seems a little bit challenging, but again, that's why I always recommend just starting where you're running low. If your dish soap is running low, maybe hop on Google and do a little research and see if there's a place that you could refill soap near you. You could go to joyfill.com and you could look on there. There are so many options, and with technology, we don't really have an excuse not to look it up. Google is our friend. There is a land of information out there, especially now with this picking up speed. It's really, really simple to find swaps that will feel good in your home, and then you can learn from there. So I have a little challenge for everyone that I would really like to share with you. Basically, it's just to do a little self-audit, to reflect and research and just look at your own lifestyle and see what areas are your strengths and what areas might be your weaknesses, and just journal on it. And the next time you're in the store, maybe don't buy that thing that comes in plastic, and go home and look it up and see if there's an alternative. I think that my strengths are definitely in the shower area. I don't know why, but I just really like finding soap bars and shampoo bars and refillables. That feels fun for me. But one of my weaknesses is definitely skincare. I am still searching for the perfect makeup remover that doesn't come in a plastic container. And you know what? I haven't found it yet, and that's okay. It's really one of those things that you can start anywhere, anytime, and it doesn't have to look like anybody else's journey, which is why I love this so much, because it really is something that we can all do in small ways that add up to a bigger picture, which is awesome.
That was an amazing take on it. Thank you, Madison.
Of course.
Honestly, you nailed it on the head. And what I enjoyed the most was the fact that just because you are like people are so stuck on a product doesn't mean that there's not other ones out there that fit your
Right.
lifestyle. And, like you were suggesting, you don't enjoy the conditioner bar, but you found an alternative. Like there will always be that niche out there. And it's just up to the consumer to actually have that consumer power to drive that market. So
Right.
it's 100% up to our choices and our habits. So, I mean, another thing that you suggested was the fact that before it's reduce, reuse, then recycle, it's like figure out, do you actually need that? Like the need, the want, everything, the mentality being there. And so, as a zero waste nonprofit, our goal is to alleviate that waste to where we become irrelevant. And so I very much believe in the fact of it's the consumer power to rethink the industry and what drives the market, and so people like myself don't have to be in this industry because it will just naturally take care of itself. So I really appreciate you hitting on all forms. Going off of that, fashion takes different molds every single year, right? So like you're suggesting, the 90s comes back. And so why are people buying new threads when vintage is back in style? That doesn't make any sense to me, right? And so I appreciate you enlightening us today on those facts. And I mean, just being here on a Sunday is phenomenal, and speaking to the community about your experiences in your industry. So I have a specific question to start off the Q and A's, and that
Sounds great.
is, do you look into making your own products because you haven't found any sustainable solutions such as makeup, or are you always on the hunt?
So I would say it's both. I am definitely more of a fixer when it comes to clothing. So I'll like patch my clothes, stitch them up when I rip through them, add new linings, stuff like that. As far as making beauty products, I've dabbled in making like lip balms and lotions and things, but it's something that I definitely need to put more time into. I wouldn't say that I'm entirely successful in creating my own beauty products, but I really do try and repair and mend as much stuff as I can, or use like old t-shirts as reusable paper towels or stuff like that, and really seeing if I can use stuff in different ways before it eventually ends up either in recycling, compost, or unfortunately the trash. So I definitely think that's a wonderful question, and maybe a personal challenge for myself to
Yeah,
start
there you
looking
go.
into, yeah, how to make products at home and more of a DIY thing, because
Hmm.
that's great too, because you can just use the containers you have at home and natural ingredients that are safer and better for the environment in and of themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. And another thing too, going off of the fast fashion industry, is those dyes are toxic, and so they can't be recycled once they're in the fibers, and so they have to be in the landfill. So all the more reason to keep that type of clothing out of consumer hands and just circulate what's already in circulation within the fashion industry.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go to Jared Miller for him to ask a
Okay.
question specifically to you. So I just asked him to talk and he should be good to
Perfect.
go.
Yeah, I was just wondering, could you just give a quick recap of what you said for the first 5 minutes? I'm sure it was kind of similar to what you were giving for the last part of your talk, but I was a little late. I was just wondering if you could give me a little recap.
Yeah, no worries. So I started out talking about our dependency on fast fashion and how, as a model, I have seen that we are making clothes for a different season every week instead of our actual 4 seasons for purpose of warmth and being comfortable as humans. And so really what's happening is textiles is one of the worst pollutants of the world. And I touched on the fact that most people are aware of other industries that are harmful to the environment. But I think the fashion world is really bad for the environment. And because we view clothing as a necessity, which it is, it hasn't really hit that light bulb for a lot of people as to how harmful it is. And so I went through a couple different ways later on. I'm sure you saw about how to build a capsule wardrobe where you have clothing that you are intending on wearing for 10 to 20 years, and you're seeking out whether it be secondhand or artisans who make really lovely quality clothing made by people who are getting a living wage, and then keeping those clothes and only buying stuff that you truly need. And so, yeah, the beginning was really just touching on how bad fast fashion is and the cycling of trends and how that sort of fuels the fire, if you will, of fast fashion, because, oh, you're suddenly out of style, but then a few years later it'll cycle back around and that will be in style, but you've then bought a new wardrobe by then, and you're just kind of stuck in this cycle of over purchasing clothing that is trendy and stuff that may not even fit your personal style. You're just wearing it because that's what everybody else is wearing. And so it's really just being confident as an individual and taking back your power as a consumer to buy what empowers you and fits your lifestyle, and then nothing more.
Great. Thanks for the recap, and a really
Yeah.
cool topic, and something that I think I often don't think about, but I probably should be thinking about more. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you for your question.
Well, Madison, did you have any other specific things you'd like to talk about before we wrap up today's webinar?
Yeah, so I guess I would just recap, in case anyone missed it, my call to action homework, if you will, which is just to go around your house and just take note of what's in plastic packaging and what you have that you're like, wow, I haven't used that in forever. Maybe I don't need to buy that in the future. And just really doing like a mini self audit and just seeing what areas you're empowered to change and what areas seem like maybe you'll want to eventually, but right now you're content, because that's totally fine. And I think this journey looks different for everybody, which is why I encourage to do a self audit, because I think starting where it feels comfortable for you is how you're going to be empowered in a long-term journey, instead of starting out really fast and like burning out. Like, I know a lot of people get excited about new stuff, so they're like, oh, I'm going to start a zero waste journey and I'm going to buy all new things that are zero waste. And it's like, that's great, but it's also kind of still the mindset that we're trying to get out of. It's using what you already have and buying less, but when you do, just buying with more intention and learning about who you're purchasing from. These days, it's so easy to just go on Amazon and click on the cheapest product and not even think about who's making it or why it's even like possible that it is that cheap. It's because of slave labor. It is too good to be true. And because it is so convenient, people don't think about it. And I do also think that a lot of people are really stressed out and don't make enough money and are underpaid and overworked, and life is really hard, especially right now with COVID and everything. So I don't necessarily blame people for leaning on convenience, because life is really difficult. However, it is important to, take a second to slow down and to really research where your money goes, because you do have power as the consumer and the businesses will follow. I genuinely believe that that is why we're seeing so many new zero waste stores pop up, or smaller companies that are, female owned businesses that are really providing a livable wage for other women, but then they're charging a lot for their products because they should. And it's a really good quality product that's going to last you for a really long time. So really it's just slowing down and being more intentional. And again, doing just a little mini self audit to see where you're at, and just doing some reflection and research. And hit me up on Instagram or somewhere and tell me how it is. I'm always curious to hear about other people's experiences, because it opens my eyes to stuff that I may not have thought about. Everybody comes up with these new fun tips and tricks. Even you challenged me to do some DIY products for myself, which I think is awesome. So it really is just a fun conversation. So I hope we can keep this conversation open. And thank you for letting me talk your ear off for a little while.
Of course, Madison, we're so fortunate to have you. Honestly, you hit it on the head about slowing down. It is all
Yeah.
about slowing down, reevaluating, and assessing what is most valuable to each individual in their entire life. So that's exactly why we named it Slow Living. And I can't thank you enough for being here today. And another thing I'd like to add for the audience that's watching is Madison also has a podcast. Would you like to talk a little bit about the podcast?
Yeah, sure. So I launched a podcast a few weeks ago. It's called the House of Card podcast, and it's a little different topic than we're discussing today, but it's basically the inside scoop for creatives who want to get their foot in the door of the industry or even find the door in the first place. It's a very secretive industry, and I'm trying to, bust that door open and be authentic and honest with people and just be like, hey, this is what you should expect. This is what isn't normal. This was my story and what I did. And eventually I'll start interviewing some fellow creatives as well. And yeah, we will be bringing you an episode every Tuesday for the next 2 years.
That is incredible. And again,
Yeah.
Madison, can't thank you enough for being here today. Everybody, thank you for tuning in and listening to the wonderful Matison Card.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, for the sign off, always respect your mother and respect each other. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you so much.
You too. Thanks.